Hello, my spooky friends, and welcome back, or welcome to my channel. This video was initially going to be a whispered video, but it seems when I whisper, I get more congested. So, today we will be soft speaking. Now, it is Monday, so you know what that means. We have another true crime ASMR video for you. Today's video was recommended by BoredAlice. Today we will be covering the disturbing case of Polly Klaas. This case stunned the nation in 1993 and put a lot of things in motion, such as missing persons data being shared across all sheriff departments and making criminal records available to police officers when they pull people over. So if you have a previous record, when they pull you over, all of that info pulls up. Not just your driving record. Polly Klaas was kidnapped at knifepoint during a slumber party at her mother's home in Petaluma, California, on October 1st, 1993. Her case garnered national media attention and was a turning point in the way missing person cases were handled by law enforcement. I will, as always, be adding this case to my true crime ASMR series playlist. This is where you can find past and future videos in this series. Thank you so much to all of you who take the time to hang out with me each week and have helped me create this spooky community. I really enjoy talking to all of you in the comments and getting your perspectives on things. Every Monday is a true crime ASMR Monday for this channel. If you enjoy true crime and all things spooky, I highly suggest hitting the like and subscribe buttons below. Now, let's get into it. Polly Hannah Klaas was born on January 3rd, 1981. She was born to Eve Nichols and Mark Klaas. During that October 1st, 1993, Polly's parents were divorced and they were staying in separate houses. On the night of October 1st, 1993, Polly was having a slumber party with two friends, Jillian Pelham and Kate McLean. Polly and her friend Jillian waited for Kate outside that evening. Kate arrived with her mother at the Klaas home around 8:30 p.m. It was Friday night, and the girls planned an evening of ice cream and movies. While Polly and her friends were having the time of their lives, Polly's mother Eve and her sister Annie slept peacefully in their beds in the family's 3-bedroom home. No one would have any idea what would occur right in the Klaas household. Around 9:45 p.m. that evening, Eve Nichols had stopped to tell the girls to quiet down. Eve stated that she had a headache and was going to bed early. Now, Eve's bedroom was right across the hall from Polly's bedroom. Eve would take a sleeping pill and went to bed. The party would continue for another hour before the worst case scenario occurred. Around 10:30 p.m., the girls would be terrified by an intruder. Around 10:30, a man would enter the girls' bedroom. Kate and Jillian initially assumed it was a joke until they spotted the knife in the man's hand. He told them if they screamed, he would slit their throats. Immediately, he tied them up and asked questions. First asking which of the girls lived there and who else was in the home. Now, to be expected, the girls were terrified. The man then assured them that he was only there for money and would not harm them. But when Polly told the man where the money was in a jewelry box, the intruder made no attempts to find the money. He then tied and gagged the girls and put pillowcases over their heads. He then would make Polly get up and told Jillian and Kate to count to 1,000 and assured them that by the time they were done counting, Polly would be back. However, when the girls reached 1,000, Polly was gone. The intruder had taken Polly into the night, unseen and unknown to Polly's mother, sleeping only in the bedroom right next door. About 30 minutes after he left with Polly, the two other girls managed to free themselves and woke Polly's mother. At first, the prosecution said that Eve thought it was a joke. Talking to a police dispatcher, she sounded disoriented and uncertain. Her voice finally rose with anxiety and turned hoarse as she seemed to grasp that her daughter was really gone. Eve stated, apparently a man just broke into our house and took my daughter. She said as though she could not believe it. I just woke up and 2 girls here spent the night with my daughter. She is 12 and a half. Her voice began to grow more desperate as she responded to the dispatcher's questions. She is not here. I didn't even hear anything. I was asleep. The dispatcher asked to speak to one of the girls, and Kate McLean's voice would be heard. He took Polly away, said the 12-year-old. We heard the screen door bang shut. She described how the kidnapper had tied them, put pillowcases over their heads, and promised to only rob and not hurt them. And she told the dispatcher how their hands had begun to swell. Her calm, mature tone finally turned tearful when she described her sore hands and related that she had not yet talked with her own mother. I need to call my mom, she cried. The police responded in minutes. Investigators inspected the bedroom, and as to be expected, the room was in disarray. On the floor was binding materials like cut Nintendo gaming cords, purse straps, and pillowcases, corroborating the girl's account of what happened. Petaluma police were instantly discouraged. They only had a few things of evidence. The lead investigator of the case grabbed the rug of the bedroom in hopes of finding DNA. The FBI would soon be contacted to assist in the investigation shortly after midnight. Special Agent Ed Fryer became the lead investigator on this case. It then became evident to Ed that this was a stranger abduction case, meaning the assailant had no ties to the family, girls, or even the community. These cases are difficult to solve because the investigators have nowhere to really start. Mark Klaas, Polly's father, was immediately cleared as a suspect, and now investigators were turning to the girls Jillian and Kate for answers. Investigators brought in a sketch artist, and after 2 hours, the girls were able to give them an idea of what the assailant looked like. The girls were then brought to police headquarters for additional questioning. This was a little after 4 a.m. The evidence response team, led by Tony Nashville at the time, went to the bedroom to scan for further evidence. The team had access to equipment that the police did not have. The team would uncover over 4 dozen fingerprints that the police had missed. All were attributed to family and friends. After hours of searching, the team, however, would not turn up empty-handed. A palm print would be found and would be one of the first pieces of forensic evidence tying the assailant to the crime. The palm print was found on the bed on the crossbar of the bed frame, where the assailant had to have leaned against the bed while he was torturing the girls. The print was collected, and unfortunately, at this time, print records were fairly new. The systems were fairly new. And at this time, in 1993, they only had fingerprints, not palm prints. The palm print was not useful in finding the assailant, as the print would only be useful after the perpetrator was captured. The hunt for the perpetrator was haunting authorities in Petaluma. By dawn, 180 officers and agents had begun a 24-hour search for Polly and her abductor. Helicopters were scanning the area, and canines were searching for her as well. Every house in the neighborhood was searched, and agents were desperately interviewing the teachers at Polly's school, classmates, and every one of Polly's neighbors. Now this part. If I was Eve Nichols or Mark Klaas, I would have moved from this town. Anyway, so after they interviewed all these neighbors, several people would recount a stranger lurking around the neighborhood that fit the description provided by the girls, and they saw him the night Polly was abducted. Thomas Georges and his friends were on their way to the movie store around 9 p.m. the night of October 1st, when he noticed a man lurking around the Klaas home. Thomas knew everyone in his neighborhood, but stated he had never seen this man before. On their way home, the boys saw that the stranger was still lurking in the shadows of the Klaas home. Thomas's description of the stranger matched the sketch of the man Jillian and Kate described. Sean Bush was playing games with friends in a rental cottage that resided behind Polly's house. Around 10:30 p.m., Sean glanced out the window and would be surprised to see a strange man on the back porch of Polly's house. The man appeared to be going to the back door. There were multiple people who stated seeing this man around the Klaas home, and none reported it. Time was working against the Petaluma police. The likelihood of Polly being alive was diminishing, and police were reaching out to all agencies and continued to comb the neighborhood. Meanwhile, the FBI were combing through all possible suspects, including combing through all recently released men from the nearest jails, such as those with a past history of kidnapping and assault. The following day, the search for Polly became the largest manhunt in the nation. A massive community volunteer group was created to assist investigators in the search for Polly. Flyers being placed anywhere they could. Forensic expert Chris Allen re-examined the pieces of evidence from Polly's bedroom. After reviewing, Allen was able to conclude that the fibers found on what was used to bind the girls was from the perpetrator's vehicle. He was then also able to find a head of hair that was forcibly removed. This means that there was skin and DNA on this hair that could be used to compare to the perpetrator when he was found. 48 hours after the abduction, Mark Klaas received a phone call which sounded like Polly. The caller claimed to be Polly and that she was at a hotel with her abductor and that he had just stepped out. The line would then go dead. It offered the first glimmer of hope that Polly was alive. At this time, no trace was placed on Mark's phone, and authorities would then put one on his phone and wait for another call. Mark would receive another call from an alleged Polly, and this time the FBI was ready. Like the first call, it was a short phone call. Authorities traced the call and immediately went to the location in hopes of finding Polly in a household located 30 miles away. Investigators would be disappointed to find a little girl who had been dared to call Mark Klaas by friends. The call was a joke. In 2 days, 200,000 flyers of Polly Klaas had been distributed. Multiple places were used as 24-hour tip lines, receiving over 60,000 calls in 2 days. 12,000 of those calls were considered as real tips and were all treated as leads. In mid-October, Kate and Jillian were brought in again to provide details on the abductor to a flown-in forensic sketch artist. The girls were more calm and were able to provide a more in-depth picture of the assailant, the sketch being far more precise. Now, in researching this case, I found this rule of thirds. Now, for children who are abducted, a third are found alive, a third are found dead, and a third are never heard from again. I feel like as people, we all know when a child is abducted, it's not good, obviously, but I feel like when things like this are put into numbers, These statistics are disgusting. 2 out of these 3 possibilities are heartbreaking, and I just wish things were different. But a reward was put out for Polly's safe return, which investigators would receive a call from someone claiming to be the abductor. The call was traced, and authorities would arrive at a Petaluma apartment building to find a 20-year-old James Hurd. He was calling the authorities as a joke, yet again. He was arrested. I think the little girl should have been arrested too, personally. Because it's very clear that the first call was a joke as well. I think an example should have been made, but anyway. On October 17th, Polly's parents would release a letter to the abductor and Polly in the newspaper, begging for Polly's safe return. Thousands would attend a candlelit vigil in Polly's honor. The Navy would then join volunteer task forces to assist in the search for Polly. But it would be over 2 months before any information would lead to Polly. On November 28th, 1993, in Sonoma County, a sheriff deputy was called to the house of a Dana Jaffe. She had lived at a home that was off the main highway on a long, winding road. Dana had been out on her property and had noticed something unusual that she thought would be important for authorities. She led the deputy to a densely wooded area, to a clearing, and scattered in the woods were a few items. There was a large piece of silk cloth that looked to be fashioned as a hood, a couple strips of packing tape, a pair of young girl's tights tied in a knot that had human hair tied in the knot, and also other debris surrounding the area. Dana would then recall a night she had called officers to her property 2 months before, on October 1st, 1993. She had come across a gentleman who had trespassed on her property. Her babysitter, Shannon Lynch, had went to leave for the night when she had spotted a gentleman walking down the private drive. His Pinto behind him had been stuck in the ditch. The man would come to the girl's window and demand for her to get out of the car and assist him with getting the car free. The girl instantly thought his behavior was weird and refused to get out of the car. The man grew agitated that she wouldn't help him. She would then drive away, and a couple miles down the road would reach a payphone where she would call Dana. Dana would go down to inspect the situation, and the man was gone, but the Pinto remained. Dana would then call the police. The police would arrive and find a Richard Allen Davis sitting next to his Pinto. The deputies would arrive and find that Davis had bits of leaves in his hair and on his clothes, and his breath smelled of alcohol. Deputies stated he looked like he had been rolling around in the brush. Davis told deputies he had been out sightseeing and got lost. Davis blurted out to authorities that he had actually been under his car trying to free it, and that's why he looked the way he did. deputies immediately knew that was a lie because there was no way Davis could fit under the vehicle. The deputies administered roadside sobriety tests, all of which Davis passed. Deputies found empty beer cans and a duffel bag in his back seat. When they asked Davis if he had been drinking, he actually started drinking a beer, which they asked him to pour out immediately. So he's taunting police. But anyway, they then told him they wanted to pat him down. Davis would immediately become agitated. The deputies then said they could arrest him immediately just for trespassing, which Davis then accepted, them patting him down. The deputies found nothing and had nothing to go on. They stated he was just odd. His driver's record clean, and he had passed the sobriety test. The police then pulled Davis's car out and sent him on his way. This was 2 months ago and was the same night Polly Klaas was kidnapped. The deputy that Dana had called to her property 2 months later connected the dots quickly and would immediately put a call in to the Petaluma Sheriff's Department. After the evidence was collected from the crime scene, investigators scanned the area for days to find any other sources of evidence or in hopes to find Polly alive. They found nothing. Authorities would contact the Sonoma Police Department to get the information of who they had pulled over and what happened that night. They would find out the man was a Richard Allen Davis and would soon find out that Davis had been recently released on an 8-year sentence for kidnapping. In 1976, he was arrested for robbery and kidnapping and assault with intent to commit rape. In 1978, he had been arrested for another kidnapping as well as multiple counts of assault with a deadly weapon. In 1984, he was arrested for a kidnapping case and assault with a deadly weapon and armed robbery. There were multiple arrests. His mother resided in Petaluma, which gave Davis reason to be there. Davis would then be sought out by authorities at his home. That same day, a deputy sheriff would stop a van, and at the wheel was Richard Allen Davis. The deputies called the authorities, who were waiting for Davis at his home. The authorities initially arrested Davis for violating his parole, which escalated as Jillian and Kate identified Davis in a lineup. Davis vehemently denied the kidnapping. Authorities would then tell Davis that they have all the physical evidence needed to tie him to this case. After careful examination, they were able to match Davis's palm print to the palm print found in Polly's bedroom. Davis, however, did not know about the matching palm print due to being in isolation. His friend would come to visit him and show him the headlines of that day's newspaper, which Davis knew now he needed to make a deal to avoid the death penalty and hope to get out of jail. On November 30th, Davis would meet with authorities to give his statement. Davis stated he had gone to Petaluma to see his mother and was unable to find her house. At that time, he had had a few beers and walked the streets of Polly's neighborhood. At one point, he was stopped by a man who asked him if he wanted some marijuana. Davis stated he got buzzed and went to buy more beer. Davis stated he then wandered the neighborhood aimlessly. Davis said he wasn't sure where he was or what he was doing. Davis, however, had come to the town of Petaluma with a bag packed with bindings and tape. Forensics were able to confirm this by comparing fibers. Davis said he then picked a random house on the street and crawled into a window and might have grabbed a knife from the kitchen. Davis then states he blacked out and then was in his car with a young girl sitting next to him. He said she was complaining that her hands were tingling. Davis stated he drove around a few times thinking of what he had done and what he should do next. He said that was when he got the car stuck. Once he realized he was stuck for good, he got Polly out of the car and carried her away into the woods, planning to leave her there while he freed the car. The rest of Davis's stories matched the witness accounts. Davis would agree to lead authorities to the decomposed body of Polly Klaas under a piece of plywood. Taped interviews will show that Davis seemed uncertain whether he had raped the girl, denying it at times, but also saying he could not be sure. An autopsy was inconclusive. By this time it had been so long and she was out to the weather and natural devices. But the girl was found with her clothing pulled up to her chest. After a long and tumultuous trial, Davis was convicted on June 18th, 1996, of first-degree murder with 4 special circumstances: robbery, burglary, kidnapping, and attempted lewd act on a child. A San Jose Superior Court jury returned a verdict of death. At his formal sentencing, Davis provoked national outrage by taunting his victim's family, extending both middle fingers at a courtroom camera, and later saying that Klaas's last words just before he killed her implied that her father molested her. Judge Thomas Hastings then formally sentenced Davis to death, telling Davis that his conduct in the courtroom made the decision to pass the death sentence significantly easier. Davis has been on death row since 1996. As of January 2024, Davis remains on California's death row in the Adjustment Center at San Quentin State Prison. California hasn't executed anyone since 2006, when Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor. And though voters in 2016 narrowly approved a ballot measure to speed up the punishment, no condemned inmate faced imminent execution. Since California's last execution, its death row population has grown to house 1 of every 4 condemned inmates in the United States. Now, that is the case of Polly Klaas. And this case infuriates me for multiple reasons. I think it's very absurd that we are in 1993 and there were multiple missing persons cases before this. And it took this long for the proper handling of missing persons cases. I mean, there's been so many cases where the communication between law enforcement was lacking, and you could just cross state lines and you would be fine back in the day. It's just disgusting. It shouldn't have taken this long for these things to be treated correctly. And the fact that deputies had him in custody, well, not in custody, but they had him the night that, and we don't know if she had already been taken care of by then, if he really had her waiting in the woods. We just don't know. But she could have been found 2 months prior to when she was found, and this man would have been in custody. Who knows what he did in the 2 months after this? We don't know. Just disgusting how this was treated back then. Now, I feel like my next opinion is going to be a hot take. You do not have to agree. This is my opinion. I always end my videos with my opinion on things, especially on my true crime. So, Richard Allen Davis was arrested for multiple things prior, and these were all heinous crimes, 1978 and 1984. One including attempted rape, all including assault and kidnapping. So, why is he out here? That is my question. I personally think that if you commit crimes that are heinous like this, I think after so many arrests, you should first of all get a longer sentence. The fact that he got out in only 8 years for attempting to kidnap, murder, and rape someone is just wild to me. I can't imagine how that woman felt. But I feel like you should get like 2 strikes, and on the second strike, the time be doubled. And if you are committing rape, attempted rape, and kidnap, like, these aren't people that are fit for society. Like, I believe everybody has the ability to change, but if you've done it 2 times, the second time needs to be more, they should all be treated seriously, but with more, this should have been an example, like make an example of him time, because he's not getting it. I don't think, like, if you get arrested 1 time, that should be the big one. You shouldn't be immediately let go and then go home and be like, well, I can do it better next time. That's something wrong up here. Those people need to be evaluated and get therapy and get the help that they need and be monitored. And I know, like, this is back in 1993, but there were ways to handle this that would have went better. But again, if you get to a 3rd arrest, it should be tripled, and at that point, you should not be able to come back out into society until you are evaluated and seen as fit to be out in society. I do not have any children, but I would protect yours at any moment. And I think that's what it comes down to. And it isn't just the children, it's the human race. We're talking about people. Whether they're old or they're young, we need to protect them, and treating these things like 8 years of just being arrested and sitting in a cell, there needs to be more than that. And it infuriates me that this man was out and about. And like, he was on parole during this time, and he left the halfway house he was at. Like, there's a lot wrong here. And the way that he just was so rude to the family in that courtroom. I can't imagine how Mark Klaas feels. Because the way Davis acted was disgusting. Davis even referred to Polly as a fucking young broad, flipped off her family, all when he was sentenced. I just hope that his peers are as disgusting to him as he was to the people in his life. But fun fact about this case, because I would like to have some good things in this video. Polly loved the book Little Women. Actress Winona Ryder, who had been raised in Petaluma, offered a $200,000 reward for Klaas's safe return during the search. Ryder would go on to star in the movie Little Women after Klaas's death, and she dedicated it to her memory because it had been Klaas's favorite book. And if you really wanted another reason to love Winona Ryder, there you go. Klaas's body was cremated, and her ashes were spread over the Pacific Ocean by her friends and family. In the wake of her murder, Klaas's father, Mark, became a child advocate and established the Polly Klaas Foundation. He has made himself available to parents of kidnapped children and has appeared frequently on Nancy Grace and Larry King. The All Points Bulletin was broadcast on the CHP, which is the California Highway Patrol channel, which only CHP radios could receive. CHP practice changed after the case. The radio system was upgraded, and such bulletins are now broadcast on all police channels. In October 1998, a performing arts center was named in her honor in Petaluma, but was closed in 2000 because of building safety issues and a lack of funding. In November 2022, the Polly Klaas Community Theater reopened. In the wake of the murder, politicians in California and other U.S. states supported 3 strikes laws. And California's 3 Strikes Act was signed into law on March 8th, 1994. Now, California's 3 Strikes law is similar to what I had just said. It sets longer sentences for repeat offenders. I, however, think it should be 2 strikes for specific offenses, like offenses that cause harm to others mentally or physically. Should be 2 strikes, you're out. Because at that point you are choosing the safety of the majority over the inflictor. So, which some people may absolutely hate me for that, and you're more than welcome to your own opinion. When I see this man's face, it enrages me. And he's still on death row. They were not able to confirm that with evidence. Polly was raped. When you initially look at this case, they do not bring up the rape quite as clearly as I think that they should. I think her clothes were up to her chest, so I think we can know what happened. the fact he didn't have the decency to pull it back down says more about him than anything. And plus he had this previous just list of offenses that included rape, and they tried, there's no doubt in my mind that's what happened. And it breaks my heart for Polly and her family. She was just tortured, and it's just so sad. So, that is today's video. I hope you found this video to be informative and relaxing. I threw a lot of information at you in this one, and I just wanted to include everything I could, not only for you or myself, but for Polly. Polly was brutally murdered and taken from the safety of her home. And I and you are important in making sure the pain and brutality of her death is known and not forgotten, so that we can work together to prevent these things in the future. If you see something, say something. I think as people, we see sketchy things and we always don't want to start a problem. We don't want to cause a fuss. And this is a prime example of multiple people seeing a crime before it happened. And now I'm sure those same people live with that guilt every day, as they should.